In this video we travel miles around England looking for an old nemesis bird, a rare pipit, an even rarer wagtail, a really rare thrush, a really big scarce bird and some owls. This adventure began with a reasonably short drive into Yorkshire, not far from Leeds. The following morning it was cold with thick fog. Good morning, folks.
Morning.
It's a cold morning.
Freezing. There's ice and everything.
There's ice and everything, and we're on our way to another sewage works. I know, yeah. We're aiming to try and find a water pipit, which has been my nemesis bird again. Nemesis bird last year. We saw one in the end, but didn't get footage of it, so we couldn't count it. So we're trying to break the curse today. It is a bit foggy, but hey ho. We began our walk down the lane, but noticed a shape in the field opposite where we'd parked. And despite the fog, we were able to identify it as a grey partridge, a bird we didn't get on our list last year, and now this is the second time we've seen one this year. Excellent. We continued down the path, seeing in the fields on our right some pheasants amongst some farm machinery. After about 10 minutes we arrived at the entrance to the sewage works, ready for the all too familiar peering through the fence, trying to ignore the smell. Although the site was pretty busy with workers today, there were still plenty of birds feeding off the filter beds. Our main challenge was to try and identify these birds amongst the fog. And although this was difficult at times, there were quite a few birds here feeding. There were magpies, pied wagtails and chaffinches aplenty. There was some excitement when we did spot a pipit, but we were unsure what species it was, with the fog obscuring our views. We carried on watching, hoping for the fog to clear a little, and it did start to a bit. Things were starting to look more encouraging. At this time we had a lovely distraction from this wonderful grey wagtail that came really close. By now we'd been here for quite a while, but we're still quite determined to find our water pipit. And now it looks like our perseverance had paid off. We noticed the bird perching actually on the filter itself as it span round slowly. And even through the remaining fog, I was able to identify it as not a meadow pipit, which was a start. This bird seemed not only a bit chunkier, but the plumage was greyer, and the leg colour was much darker. Another feature which really picks the meadow pipit apart is its very long hind claw, whereas this bird didn't really have that. Hey folks.
We have a water pipit.
Finally, we have a water pipit, and I'm wearing merch. Get yourself one. Yeah, we've got a water pipit. We were like 99% sure, but we've just had to try and identify it with an app online because the light's not great and there's many pipits here too, but
it is.
We're pretty happy with that. That's a water pipit.
Only took us 2 years.
Only took us 2 years to get footage of it. Right, well that's not jinxed me this year. Happy that we'd finally broken our curse, we stuck around and watched the water pipit for a while to try and get a bit more footage, and to be absolutely sure this was the species we were looking at. As the fog slowly continued to lift, the birds became a little bit more active feeding on the filter beds, with the water pipit constantly jumping up on the filter itself, seemingly enjoying the slow merry-go-round, occasionally jumping off to pick up an insect to feed on. It was often joined on this sewage works carousel by multiple pied wagtails, also being dropped off at their favourite patch of the filter bed to eat. This was endlessly entertaining to watch. We even noticed in the distance on one of the buildings a couple of oyster catchers preening on the roof. By now though, we did have to head back towards the van alongside the fields that were now a bit clearer, now the fog had somewhat lifted. On one of these fields we noticed a group of birds feeding in the grass. These turned out to be starlings, but were joined by one of our more colourful and charismatic winter thrushes, the fieldfare. We continued on down the path towards the van. When we arrived, we opened the van door and made ourselves some well-earned breakfast. Whilst eating, we scanned the field opposite, noticing that our grey partridge friends were still there, and this time unobscured by thick fog, giving us lovely views.
We watched them for a short while running about the field, and eventually they took to the air and flew across the field over to the far side in the distance. Now though, we had to move on, as we had another very rare bird to find.
Hey folks, we're in North Lincolnshire. We're looking now for an eastern yellow wagtail that's been here. We have just bumped into another bird who said it's just flown off. So
Let's go wait then.
we're gonna go and wait and hope some more that it flies back, because this would be a lifer. So stick with us.
Despite this slightly discouraging news, we were still reasonably confident, as the bird had been sighted on multiple occasions on recent days. So we headed to a bank that looked over some pits, where the wagtail had been previously feeding on one of the islands. Here we got chatting to one of the other birders present.
Hey folks, so we're here at the spot now, and the wagtail's not here.
Definitely not.
We've spoken to a couple of people and they said it's flown quite far in the distance behind like some farm buildings. So we're going to wait, we're going to hold out and hope it comes back, so stick with us.
We had a bit of a theory that the wagtail may have been spooked by this bit of machinery that seemed to be draining one of the pits. Right or wrong, we scanned the area behind us in the direction the wagtail flew. Above the ploughed field in front of us, there were plenty of birds in the air. Flocks of gulls flew high above the farm, and these were joined by a buzzard circling. A bit of excitement came when a bird flew over us that looked like a wagtail. It was, but not our eastern yellow wagtail. This was the more common pied wagtail. By this time, we'd been here for about 2 hours, with no sign yet of our target species. We decided now to have a little bit of a walk down the field, just to see if the wagtail was hiding behind lumps of mud. But again, we were unsuccessful. The only wagtail we could find was the pied wagtail, so we went back to our original spot to wait and hope for our eastern yellow wagtail to show. This species would be a lifer for us, and is very rare, with annual records in the UK being only in single figures. As time went on, we did see more birds, with flocks of geese flying over as we were very near the Humber estuary. And although still no sighting of our target species, we did spot another bird for our year list in the shape of a sparrowhawk, which flew over the farm buildings and then was obscured behind a tree. Although in birding, sometimes patience and perseverance really does pay off, on this occasion it didn't seem like it was going to. We'd been here for a good few hours, and our next target species for the day was over 3 hours drive, so we had to reluctantly make the decision to give up on this bird and move on.
Hey folks, unfortunately after over 2.5 hours of waiting, no show from the eastern yellow wagtail, which I'm genuinely gutted about. Kaylee's already gone back to the van and I'm just about to join her. We've got a long drive ahead of us now, so stick with us. We're going south.
Our next stop was Buckinghamshire. My aim was to try and get there before it started to go dark.
Hey folks, we've been driving for over 3 hours and it's towards the end of the afternoon and we're in a place called Newport Pagnell looking for a very rare Richard's pipit that's arrived. So
We had one last year.
we did see one last year, so hopefully we can get one this year, but we're a bit late to the party and a bit late in the day, so let's hope it's still here.
The Richard's pipit we were looking for had been seen on the far side of a very large field, which seemed to be pretty popular with dog walkers. We headed across the expanse of grass, hoping to find some other birders, as it would be difficult to find a small brown bird in this huge area. We did spot en route one small brown bird, but this was a skylark, so we continued to search, and luckily, eventually, found a woman who was looking at something. We asked if it was the Richard's pipit, and she said she thought so, although the bird was skulking low behind tufts of grass, so was being challenging to get a positive ID on. We stood and waited for the bird to hopefully come out in the open, and after a while, it did. Although quite mobile, it came out in the open a few times as it was feeding amongst the grass. This species breeds in Siberia, Mongolia and China, migrating in the winter to the Indian subcontinent and Southeast Asia, with a few birds turning up in Western Europe, and annually a few in the UK. We were lucky enough to see one of these birds last year, although very distant, so it was amazing to see one of these wonderful pipits a bit closer. It fed in a patch for a while and then flew not too far into another bit of grass and fed again. So we followed it.
We got it.
We found her. We found the little birdie. It's kind of in front of us, although I keep losing. Oh, I can see it again now.
I can see it.
It keeps going behind tufts of grass. When we arrived, there was another birder who kind of thought she'd seen it, and then it showed and flew around a bit, and we followed it a little bit. But it's a lovely bird. That's amazing. Far better than the last time we saw it. I think the second time I've ever seen one. So excellent. Well, that's a nice way to end the day after the disappointment of not seeing the yellow wagtail.
Although we would have loved to have stuck around to spend some more time with this wonderful pipit, we did have to head back to the van as we were slowly losing the light. Whilst wandering back, bowled away by our amazing views of the Richards pipit, we got another nice surprise in the shape of a barn owl that was hunting along the edges of the field. We watched it for quite some time as it hunted. It eventually landed in a tree after being spooked by some crows, and then flew out of the tree, over the hedge and out of sight. What an amazing way to end this birding day. Now we had to drive for a while to our overnight destination in Hampshire. The following morning we woke up to more fog, but excitedly headed to our next bird. This one was pretty special.
Hey folks, we're in Hampshire, near Borden and Linford.
But you can't guess what we're going after.
We're going after a black-throated thrush that's apparently in somebody's garden, or it has been.
No, it's been seen out of it this morning.
It has been seen out of it this morning, but that was like an hour and a half ago, so
We've had to park the van miles away.
yeah, we're in for a bit of a walk because there's no parking. Yeah, could be interesting, this one. Yeah, stick with us, let's see what happens.
The instructions had been to head for a gate by the river, where we paid a donation to charity and then were able to go on some private land, which looked over into the garden where the black-throated thrush had been seen. We were a bit apprehensive, but when we got there, it was really well organised, and we were led with some other birders down a very muddy track alongside a stream, eventually getting to a group of birders which looked over the stream into a back garden where there were some bird feeders. This is apparently where the black-throated thrush had been spending some of its time in previous days. When we arrived with the other birders, we were informed the thrush had disappeared, but they were pretty confident it'd reappear. And it did. Through the fog it appeared in a bush above the bird feeders, sat out in the open, so even though the visibility wasn't great, it was unmistakable. After being in the bush for a short time, the black-throated thrush came to the floor to feed amongst the other birds. It hopped around the grass and fed under the bird feeders. It looked really quite at home. And although not looking massively out of place in this Hampshire garden, it is far away from its usual distribution. This species breeds in Siberia and Mongolia, and winters in the Middle East and Central and East Asia. So, is pretty far away from where it should be at this time of year. Despite this, a few of this species have turned up in the UK. I was lucky to see one a few years ago in Wales, and we saw one last year, but only really briefly, and couldn't count it on our year list as we didn't get footage. This one, although at a distance in the fog, was showing lovely, and it was really exciting to see it like this. In the short time we were there, it did come to the floor a few times to feed. Sometimes partially obscured by plants and sometimes out in the open. At one point when it flew off, I videoed a blackbird for a while. Then the black-throated thrush came down and chased the blackbird off, as if this garden was its territory. What a stunning bird. We only watched it for a short while, and as people were queuing to see it, we headed back and gave them the opportunity to witness this amazing bird.
We've had it.
Yeah, that was really exciting.
That was really cool. So we walked up to a gate where there was a guy with a bucket collecting for charities.
Really organised.
Really organised. Great Ormond Street and
Local conservation.
like a local conservation place. And we we walked across kind of a gardeny, kind of muddy field thing.
Oh, it was amazing, the garden.
I know, it was awesome. To a stream which overlooked the garden the black-throated thrush has been showing, and it really was. It wasn't. It wasn't there when we arrived, and then it came down a couple of times. Once chasing a blackbird away, and although it was a bit foggy, it was really super. What a great start to the day.
Absolutely.
Onwards, upwards.
We now headed to a field in Oxfordshire. We found a suitable place to park and then headed up the hill towards where our target bird had last been seen.
Hey folks, Kaylee's down there, look. We're looking for a great bustard that's been reported here sporadically. We're in Oxfordshire over the last kind of few days, including yesterday, but we've come to where it's been spotted and it doesn't appear to be here. There's lots of hares and it's very pretty, but no great bustard currently. See if we can find it, stick with us.
This area was beautiful, with rolling countryside and hares jumping about in the fields. There were some majestic red kites flying overhead, but no great bustard. It had been reported in this particular field on and off for the last few weeks, so we thought it might be a sure thing, especially with it being such a large bird. But no sign at all. Disappointed, we headed back in the direction of the van, en route seeing a group of deer in the far corner of the neighbouring field. We both had a look at this group and I thought I'd try and get some footage of them. Whilst doing this, we noticed that one of the deer wasn't a deer at all. It was a great bustard. This bird was happily feeding amongst the deer. It was a bit in the distance and through heat haze, but it was definitely the bird we were looking for.
Well, who'd have thought it? We were just about to give up. We were walking back towards the van thinking, oh, no, we're not going to see this today.
Saw a load of deer in a field.
And the bustard's amongst the deer. But it's quite distant, but it's there. Oh, one bustard for the year. Amazing. This road's really busy.
It's amazing sometimes when you think you're not going to see something and it shows up out of the blue. Or in this case, in a herd of deer. Regardless, we were super happy to see it. Although it remained distant and through heat haze, we watched it for some time, happily feeding in the field. This very large species were driven to extinction in the UK by 1832, but since the late 90s they've been reintroduced from Spanish populations, and they've done pretty well, with most of them being on Salisbury Plain. This is where we saw them last year, but unfortunately, due to the bad driving conditions, we got a flat tyre on the van. So seeing this one here has avoided that happening again. The great bustard is globally endangered, with 60% of the population being in Spain and Portugal, with some smaller populations being in Russia and the Hungarian plains, and a few here in the UK. Most of these birds stick around the Salisbury Plain, but occasionally a few birds wander, like this one. Over the moon to see this fantastic bird, we headed back towards the van, passing en route a tree full of small birds. Upon investigation, most of these birds were linnets, but were joined by a few meadow pipit too. We watched these for a while, and then it was time to leave.
Hey folks, well, great bustard found at a distance. That was a quite nice end to this video. We've seen a couple of pipits, including last year's Nemesis water pipit, and the nice and rare...
Is that an owl?
You are kidding me.
There.
It bloody is, excuse me guys.
As we were recording this part, about to wrap up this video, Kaylee noticed a barn owl in the distance. This bird was hunting about 1 in the afternoon around the edges of some farmland, at one point diving to the floor, sitting there for a bit and then getting back up again. It must have tried to catch something but missed it. The owl put on a real show for us, and the lady who'd parked up just down the lane. This is the second one of this wonderful owl species we've seen this weekend, and honestly I never tire of them. They are fascinating to watch. The owl did a couple of circuits near the farm building, then flew towards the van and came really close before it veered off into a field. As we watched the owl fly off, we noticed some red kites displaying to each other in that field.
We're back. That was pretty amazing.
It came... Wow.
Yeah. It came really close to the van, like super close, and yeah, crazy. Really, really cool.
That was incredible.
That was.
And there's 2 kites over there. This
Right.
place is nuts.
What a way to end this video. Wow. Well, thanks for watching. Please like
Please subscribe.
and please press the notification bell. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.